Okay, we'll go ahead and get started this evening. Welcome to the August 7th regular meeting of City Council. Roll call, please.
Mayor Brinkman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Stallman?
Here.
Councilmember Beckman?
Here.
Councilmember Cernanik?
Present.
Councilmember Cole?
Here.
Councilmember Taylor?
Present.
Councilmember Valdez?
Present.
Will you rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council, does anyone have a change to the agenda? I do. We had the approval of the South Platte 2 Working Group letter to the Army Corps of Engineers under general business. We moved that when we knew we were going into an exec, but I do need approval on that letter, so I would like to add that back to general business.
So will you give us a few minutes before that to read it?
Okay. It was the one that was emailed to you a week ago. It's the same one.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Jim?
I'm not in favor of doing that, and I will vote against changing the agenda to add that on. I think we had this scheduled for an executive session. I've got some comments I'd like to make about that that are going to concern whether we do sign that letter or not.
Okay.
Is there a timing issue on this?
Yes.
So could we go into executive session, then come back out on that issue?
That's what I would recommend.
Okay. Anything else? Okay.
When do you want to go into exec session?
We'll go into exec at the end of the meeting, and then we'll come back out. We will.
So we would add that general business. We'd come out of executive session and then have that as a final agenda item and come back in here.
Okay. Okay, the minutes from the July 3rd meeting. Any changes? I do have a change on page 4. Page 4, line 126, in where it says the City of Littleton is working with a group called, it should be South Platte Working Group 2 is working with a group called Brightwater, and that's WRIGHT. And on line 127.
Wait, right, water?
Yeah, WRIGHT. Water. And on 127, Brightwater, who will provide a white paper that will be important to the City of Littleton. I guess that can stay. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why that's there, but it's not incorrect. And then line 130, a sentence that says increase the allocation of Chatfield. I would just suggest that that be eliminated.
Okay.
Any other changes? Okay. The draft minutes from the July 10th study session. Any changes there? I have one on page 8. On line 330, Hebert is Herbert.
Yeah, I gave her that one. I just figured that was
Okay.
a technical.
Sorry.
That's okay. Anybody have anything? Okay.
I've given her some as well.
Okay. So seeing no others, those are approved as revised. Comments and reports, City Manager.
I have no report this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Cole.
I'm going to let Councilmember Taylor comment on a couple things we jointly did.
Councilmember Taylor.
Well, first of all, I want to start off with the reminder that the CML District 3 meeting is in Boulder, September 5th, which is the first Wednesday right after Labor Day. The RSVPs are due prior to that time because of the Labor Day holiday. So if you're planning to go, you need to get your RSVP into Marlene. The second thing is, Peggy made reference to, I'm very interested in having a discussion between the council and the staff on TODs on two major properties we've got. The Insur and Marathon properties are prime examples of where we can have some impact into how that's going to look like, and even look like some of the same things we looked at in Belmar that we had the study session about earlier today. We need to look at inclusionary zoning and somehow take into this conversation the Housing Authority for them to look at cooperating and participating with a potential developer for some workforce units, some percentage of that. And I'm not talking about Section 8, I'm talking about workforce rentable, affordable units. When you're on a transit line, and both Marathon and Insur are on transit lines, one being bus, the other being rail, you can get workers back and forth to their jobs very quickly, and that is very important, and I think we need to have this discussion about what we can do with this. I'll go ahead with the DRCOG report. DRCOG had a public hearing on the Transportation Improvement Plan and calling for projects. And some of our best arguments that we get into occur when we have very little money and a whole lot of projects to try to fund. And trying to sort all that out has been just a major part of our discussions over the last 2 months. It's going to continue in the meeting next week and possibly into the meeting in September. The discussions just keep going on and on. We, out of a different pot of money, DRCOG gave a grant to I-225 project helping boost their light rail. Each of the rail corridors is assigned a fund of money out of a futures project, and I-225 asked for about half of their money up front to kickstart their project over there, so we did grant that. That's the DRCOG report.
Bruce?
I attended the Littleton Fire Protection District Board meeting on the 23rd of July. Principal input items for us would just be their enthusiasm for getting into the budget process as per the new contract, which city manager is aware of, as well as the new contract for the fire pumper, which I believe we're talking about tonight, because that's the one that's got the split titling because of the financing attribute. Okay. There was a letter I got copied on an email and City Manager Penny and Public Works Director Bloston were on it as well, concerning from John Hendricks at Centennial Water and Sanitation concerning the total maximum daily limit issues that are somewhat parenthetical to the nutrient issues, different topic, but it has to do with the Water Quality Control Division. I'm not going to go deep on that right now, but I didn't get a chance, Michael, to clear off with you this afternoon, but I wanted to ask if you could, at the appropriate time, brief council on the status of that dimension of the whole process. Whether it's a study session or not, it's up to you.
I can make it short and sweet, and we could do it at the end of council updates if you want before, or schedule it for a later time. Probably do it in less than 5 minutes.
Okay, whatever.
As long as council doesn't ask questions.
Whatever you prefer. And lastly, I'd like to commend City Manager Penny and Finance Director Farman for establishing a new process that we're, I guess, dubbing the Finance Department ride-along in deference to the Police Department. As I understand it, if you want to go in and see how they're doing the cops refinancing now, they'll walk you through the spreadsheet. So I think that's awesome, personally. Thank you. That's all I have.
Anyone else interested in that right now?
Jerry?
The City of Littleton and some local organizations, as well as some individuals, will be hosting a back-to-school function on August 12th. It will be held at Promise Park from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. There'll be food, games, clowns, all kinds of good stuff there. 14 booths with schools, library, medical, and dental, and other information. So that's August 12th, 4 to 7 at Promise Park. That's it.
Thanks. Phil?
The South Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce has a, for lack of a better term, a meetup group that is gathering called Littleton Business Coalition. The second meeting is this Thursday morning at 7:30 at Delizio's. It's particularly focused on those folks that have a business that is actually located within the city of Littleton. I did have the opportunity to attend the Dr. Cog MVIC MetroVision Issues Committee on a supplemental allocation with regard to 2012-2017 TIP funding that was held last Wednesday. The issue is at least tentatively set to be taken up by the board next on the 15th of August. The discussion wavered between taking on the large projects with this supplemental funds available as opposed to dealing with the ranking that is done by points that would spread it across a broader number of projects. And that was the issue, and I expect that Jim and the Dr. Cog board will chew up the recommendation that might be coming from the various different subcommittees on that on the 15th. The South Suburban Park and Rec District board meeting tomorrow has two agenda items that might be of interest to folks. They're continuing discussion around their 2013 budget, and also the Chatfield reallocation is on their agenda as well. And also wanted to extend a shout out for those folks that participated in the National Night Out this evening, and a particular shout out to Joe and Sue Hansen, who are in their 5th year of being block captains, and will likely be retiring from that role at the end of this point in time. And Joe and Sue have been very active in both that and the Littleton Citizens Police Alumni Academy members. Thank you.
Bruce?
The Highline Canal Working Group is moving continually onward in its goal of identifying the priorities to ensure that the Highline Canal is a viable linear park for the citizens of Littleton and Arapahoe County, Denver, and on up through Aurora for the future. The challenges to the Highline Canal are significant, and the most obvious one for those of us that travel on that is the lack of water in the canal and what it's doing to the vegetation. But there are parts of the canal further out of Littleton that are even deteriorating further. On that effort today, there was a presentation by the consultant who is advising the working group on the issues that they've identified in the canal for the full 70 miles. That presentation had been previously made last month at the South Suburban Board, and the same presentation today was made to the Arapahoe County Board of Commissioners. And the one issue that was discussed, which is key to the success of this group, is that it involves the kinds of comprehensive answers that are going to come from all the jurisdictions working together to find solutions. But I think we left the meeting feeling very optimistic about the future of the canal with this kind of attention. The other issue I want to discuss is that of code enforcement in the community. Over the last couple neighborhood meetings, the issues that people came to me to talk about were concerns about deteriorating properties in certain neighborhoods, and it seemed to be a continuous kind of theme with those people that addressed the issue with me. I think it's very important that the city begin to look at that issue, and perhaps maybe we could have a study session to see if we have the tools in our city to deal with those kinds of conditions. It's exacerbated by the number of properties that are being rented and the proper owner is not taking care of it, and the conditions of abandoned vehicles and uncared for vehicles left on the streets. So it's an issue that seems to be growing.
Mayor, we tentatively have on September 25th a study session with a presentation from Longmont on how they handle their code enforcement, which is titled Neighborhood and Community Liaison or something along those lines. And it's, I think, a different way to look at that. And so it's not finalized. He has some issues around his council meetings, and so, but we do have that scheduled.
I think a follow-on for that is what do we do with it after we've had a chance to hear it, whether it's that evening or at a later date?
Yeah, I think the issues that we're dealing with, I spent a lot of years working in the streets of the neighborhoods in the community, and so I have a real personal feel for as neighbors and neighborhoods improve and as they drop down a little bit. I'm very concerned from just my own personal experience of what I've seen. So it may be that we just need to make sure we have the follow-on to make sure we have the tools and the action plan after that meeting. Thank you.
Okay, and Michael, I think we'll go ahead and schedule half an hour on a study session for the other topic. Okay. This evening we have a guest citizen, Sarah Burns. Chief Coogan.
Good evening, Council. I'm excited here tonight to award a Citizen Appreciation Award. Sarah, would you please come down? You know, this is one of the nicest things that we get to do is recognize what happens in the community. And as you recall, we have a challenge coin. And when the officers have something occur on the street where someone does something so exceptional that it really steps up, they give the challenge coin at that time to that citizen. And Sarah is one of those people. Sarah, you want to introduce your family back here?
Sure. My husband, Brandon, my older daughter, Grace, and my younger daughter, Olivia.
Okay. Thank you for coming. Let me tell you about what Sarah did. On June 8, 2012, a 16-month-old baby became seriously ill and unresponsive while at the Aspen Grove business. The baby was having a seizure and suffering from a fever and nausea. Miss Sarah Burns, a nurse from Denver Porter Hospital, provided first aid and kept the baby from suffering any injuries until the arrival of officers and paramedics from the Littleton Police and Littleton Fire Rescue. Baby and mother were transported to the hospital, and thanks to Miss Burns' immediate assistance, the baby suffered no injury due to the seizure and is doing fine. So we want to thank her for saving this baby's life. Thank you very much. Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Congratulations, sir.
Okay, we've reached a point in the meeting where this is an opportunity for any citizen who wants to express an opinion or ask questions regarding city services, council policy, or other matters of community concern are welcome to come down and speak. We do have a second reading, which will also be a public hearing this evening dealing with the code changes to the Historic Preservation Board. So if you want to speak on that, if you wouldn't mind waiting until that second the public hearing on that. Is there anyone that would like to come down and address council? Jose? Okay.
Here in front of you.
Thank you. It's my honor to be back. I was almost here almost a year ago, right before I took my oath for U.S. citizenship. I'm sure many of the council members remember me. My name is Poona Dahal, and it's rare we come here to complain. And I have three things tonight. First of all, I cross the intersection of Broadway and Littleton Boulevard every day for the last 8 years. Somehow, once the truncated domes have been installed, I don't know what happened. the shape of the intersection has changed. But I really appreciate City Engineer Bob Deeds and City Staff Eric Pearson met with me this morning and worked with me. So when I cross now, I have to kind of stand in an angle so I can really cross straight across that intersection rather than crossing diagonally. So I really appreciate that time, and thank you very much. I told them I know. The reason I wanted to work with them right away because I don't think the city police and the fire ever wants to find me in the middle of the intersection injured. So I really appreciate that time. Thank you very much for that service. Now my next kind of a concern or an issue I would like to bring up. As you know, I travel through the city of Littleton all the time, and many of us, people with disabilities, we do it. And I have noticed many sidewalk cafes or permanent cafes or seating areas that I have to kind of dodge through. And as you all can tell, I'm a pretty petite person. If I have to dodge through those areas, I wonder, you know, people with normal size, the average people, and especially people with disabilities who are wheelchair bound and use crutches, imagine how difficult it would be. And I understand, I'm all for economy revival, I'm all for it, but I think we should all think about, is it really ethical to jeopardize accessibility for people with disabilities in the name of economy? So I highly encourage City Council really looking at this issue, and I do understand, you know, in terms of there are permits that, what is it called? I may not say the right way, but revocable permit, and also they need to allow at least 5 foot by 5. But I do understand in theory it is, but I am not sure that's really happening. So I highly encourage the City Council looking into this, and again, keeping in mind that providing that accessible sidewalks for all people, not just for people who can see from a distance and be able to walk around it. Now, I have a question. Does our city, the city of Littleton, do we have an ADA coordinator on the staff? My understanding is any businesses that have over 50 and over employees, we are supposed to have ADA coordinator on site. Do we? And I recently found a name, Sonia Maher, M-A-H-E-R, is listed as our ADA coordinator, but nobody seems to know who she is. So I would greatly appreciate, you know, knowing the answer, who is our ADA coordinator, if we have, if not, you know, are we thinking about it? Thank you very much, and it's truly an honor to live in Littleton and be a citizen of Littleton. Thank you very much.
Can I just answer your last question? This is Wendy Hefner. I'm the city clerk here. Our ADA coordinator is our HR department, and Sonia Maher doesn't work here anymore.
Okay, great. So maybe we want to let the other city and people in the city know she's not with the city because she's still listed as a city employee.
I will take care of that tomorrow.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else? Carol?
Hi, I'm Carol Brezak, and I live in the 4th District. Tonight you have the HPB Board second reading, and I really don't have any comments about the changes that you're going to make, but as a result of reading through that document, there were some other things that kind of jumped out at me that I thought I would bring up. One of the reasons why I pay attention to anything that has to do with the Historic Preservation Board is the issue of non-consensual designation. That idea, along with being a believer in strong property rights and eminent domain, which are two tools that the city can use, to pretty much wage war against a citizen, the way I view it. So because of those two tools that the government has, I always read what may be happening with Historic Preservation Board to make sure that something's not changing with that. And it occurred to me that it's kind of like a whack-a-mole game that the kids play. You hit it down over here, and then it could pop up over here in a month or two. And I think it would be really a nice thing for the citizens who have concerns about those two tools that the government has, knowing that council changes, the makeup and how heavy-handed a council may or may not be will change over years, is if when you are considering your charter changes, which you've spoken about, that you might consider a charter change that would add some language into the charter on eminent domain and on non-consensual designation so that the citizens don't have to play that whack-a-mole game and just wonder when it's going to pop up the next time. As a result of reading that long document, I don't know if you heard the radio this morning, and I can't even remember what radio station I was listening to, but Charlie Brown from the Denver City Council was talking, and they've got a situation with the Gates building. Now the developer's ready to do something with it. And there's a young kid in Boulder, 20 years old, who raised $250 for the fee that it costs to file a historic preservation claim, or I don't know what they call it. So for $250, this 20-year-old kid in Boulder has held up that development. Now, they'll work around it, but Charlie Brown says it's going to take months for them to work around it. So there's something in their policy that they're going to be changing the language. I did read in ours that there's just 3 entities who can make the recommendation. So I'm hoping that we're protected from something like that. The other thing that occurred to me as I was reading the tax refunds that are available to those that are in Historic Preservation District, I would suggest that the council consider, rather than giving them refunds, instead of the refund going directly to them and their benefit, why not have that refund put into a fund that is their Main Street Historic Grant Fund, so it becomes a self-funded grant rather than one that the city funds every year. It seems to me if we're giving them a refund and then we're funding them on the other end, they're kind of double dipping the way I see it. So it might be a way to look at things, have them self-fund, and I didn't see anything in there was a fee involved with filing the designation request. And if there isn't, Denver's got a $250. Maybe that's something that ought to be considered, and that could go in the fund as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Carol. Anyone else? Okay. Before we continue, I want to welcome Boy Scout troop, 377? Welcome. Okay. 7A, it's a consent agenda, resolution approving updates to the Littleton 3-mile plan. City Attorney.
This is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Littleton, Colorado, updating the City of Littleton 3-mile plan.
The proposed resolution will approve minor updates to the city's 3-mile plan for annexation, which was originally adopted in August of '09. The city has not annexed any property since the plan was adopted, so the boundaries of the plan have not changed. However, updating the plan is necessary due to 2 minor changes. The first change is in Section 2. Utilities under the telephone service providers as Quest Communications changed their name to CenturyLink. And then the second change is in Section 5, or V, summary under the reference to the City of Littleton Comp Plan, since it was recently amended with the adoption of the Downtown Neighborhood Plan in January 12. Okay. 7B, City Attorney.
This is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Littleton entering into an agreement with the Littleton Fire Protection District for titling a 2012 Pierce-CF PUC pumper fire engine.
City Council approved a lease purchase agreement with J.P. Morgan Chase Bank in February 2012, which stipulates title to be placed in the name of the city. The 2012 fire agreement states that the rolling stock title be shared equally between the city and Littleton Fire Protection District. The proposed agreement resolves this conflict in the contract language. If an agreement is not reached with the fire district, there is a risk of further deferring the payment for the district's share of the fire engine purchase. Need a motion?
Madam Chairman, I move approval of consent agenda items 7A and 7B.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Any discussion?
I was just going to mention on the fire engine, the issue arises because the city wants to lease finance and the district wants to pay cash. And so this needs to be done to accommodate both interests, just as a matter of public interest.
Ready to vote? Oh, wait, can you vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Item 8A, City Attorney.
This is an ordinance of the City of Littleton, Colorado, amending the Historic Preservation Code Title 4, Chapter 6.
And do you want to make a presentation?
Sure. I would just go through kind of a bullet point list of what came up on first reading through council and some of the minor modifications we've made. Nothing substantive has changed since first reading. We did do the renumbering issues that were addressed by Councilmember Taylor and Cole. The council member Stallman asked about reference to the design guidelines, and our community development director is going to take that back to Planning Commission and talk about how that might come back as further amendment, but it needs to go through planning first. We looked at the definition of demolition and did take the suggestion of Councilmember Taylor and Cole combining the definition of demolition and partial demolition, so someone looking at the code doesn't need to go through and be surprised when it turns up later in the definitions. And then the Main Street Historic District boundaries, the staff talked to HPB about inserting the language generally into the definition of the block from 2200 to 2700, so that would in reference to areas but beyond those blocks. That was, I think, raised by council members Taylor and Cole again. And then incentives, that's being discussed further by the Historic Preservation Board, and that was raised by Councilmember Cole. We've taken some of the grammatical errors, we've adjusted, and then we moved the appeals section because it was a little bit confusing. It was really, I think it was originally under the COA provision, and now we've clearly delineated an appeals section and renumbered the entire code. And if you have any questions about stuff that might go back to HPB, our community development director is available to answer those questions.
Okay. Council, any questions? Jim.
A general question. In the code, it talks about structures being 40 years of age. I'm curious as to how we arrived at that number, and can that number be increased to, say, 50 years? And along those same lines, it talked about the Main Street District being of interest from 1870 to 1970, yet something that's built in 1972 under the current code is eligible to become known as a historic structure. So how do those two fit together?
Glenn.
Those are very good questions. I will draw on an expert. Perhaps Andrea, could you answer the question about the 40 years? Come on up.
Thank you. I'm Andrea Mimnall, Senior Planner. The 40-year provision was added to the code before I was here. I think that was probably maybe about 10 years ago. But if I'm correct, the 40 years at that time was intended to be a number so that post-World War II resources could be considered historic landmarks. And it is more typical in a code that you would see 50 years. But We are at 40, and sometimes you even see 30.
Okay, thank you. I do have some more. Do you want me to just continue?
Go ahead.
On page 7, item number E, which is down close to the bottom, it talks about the recommendations to the Planning Commission on the design guidelines. Does that mean the Planning Commission is making the final decision, or is the Historic Preservation Board making the final decision?
Per the duties of the Planning Commission, they're the ones that adopt design guidelines. So yes, the Historic Preservation Commission put together the design guidelines. They've accepted it, but formally it's the Planning Commission that adopts them.
Okay. On page 13, on item number B, I guess I need somebody to remind me, actually B3. This subsection does not apply to any property within Main Street Historic District. I need somebody to remind me why that provision is in there, why it wouldn't apply.
I think it related to the fact that there's grants available in the Main Street District. So therefore, the property tax weren't included as an incentive for the Main Street District.
Well, that gets to my next question, which has to do with the Main Street District Grant Fund. And Kirsten made reference to this. The boundaries are much larger than just the opt-in district boundaries. I would like to see this more narrowly defined so that it is only the properties within the opt-in district that's eligible for the funding. And I do that because that would encourage people to join to opt into the district if they want to have some renovation funds. But it bothers me that we'd be giving grant funds to deal with the house across the street because it qualifies, whenever we have buildings on Main Street that can better utilize the money. And my question to council is, can we change this so that it is more narrowly defined than what it is in here? When you talk about just adding generally in here, to me that doesn't do it. We need to have much more narrowly defined boundaries.
For the grants.
Could you,
For the grant program.
Okay.
so let me ask, just for clarification on that piece, I've struggled with what that section meant, and I read it possibly two different ways, talked myself into it meaning one thing, which sounds like I talked myself into something that Councilmember Taylor sees it meaning otherwise. I thought that whole downtown boundary, I see that piece in here, but I thought the grant funds could only apply to people in the district or landmarks in the larger boundary. So it doesn't apply to other places in downtown.
That's correct. And
But I
have
don't
a
think that's
map.
what that says, Glenn. I really don't think that's what
I
that
just think it's
says.
ambiguous, and so, I batted it around in my own head, so it perhaps should be clarified.
I'm a very literal reader. It's literally, whatever it says there is what sticks in my mind. And that's not clear, what you just said.
I think I can work on language that will make that more clear.
I think the question is, though, do we limit it down to the Main Street District only and take out that ambiguity because we do read it as a larger area. If you're a landmark outside the district and you're within that portion of the downtown, then you would be eligible as well.
Well, help me. The way I understood the map that comes in here later on is that the opt-in area is larger than the district itself.
Correct.
So my objective is to get the grants available for the opt-in area only.
Whether they're in the district or not?
In order to get a grant, they had to be in the district.
Okay.
But the eligibility is for the opt-in area.
Right. Those are the properties that can opt into the district and become
Yes.
part of the district.
But right now, the way this reads, the property across the street is eligible for grant funds. Because it says, any property owners or tenants within the funds may be granted to property owners and tenants within the Main Street Historic District or designated historic man for commercial purposes. And downtown Littleton means Santa Fe to the railroad, Church to Crestline.
Correct.
And that is much larger than the opt-in boundaries or the historic district.
Correct.
But I think the sentence before that is the key one.
You'd have to be a landmark within that larger area. If you're outside the district, you would have to be a landmark within that area that's defined.
I do think that needs to be clarified.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, I have one more. On page 16, I'm having difficulty trying to determine just what the difference is between number 1 and number 2. The language is almost identical in the very beginning of them. And it seems to me that we should have some differences if it's going to come from the board or if it's going to come from a district landmark. So I just ask you to take a look at that and see if we need to come back with an amendment to clarify anything between the difference of 1 and 2.
One has to do with what the board can approve, and number 2 has to do with what the director can approve. Am I reading that correctly? So what I have authority over is something that's not visible to the public, typically, something on the back of a historic building or within a district. Anything else is under the board's purview.
Okay.
I think it's pretty confusing myself, the way, having those two worded the way they are.
That could probably be clarified to take out any, okay? Anything else, Jim?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Peggy?
I have a few on page, read all my scribbling here. On page 3, and I'm not prepared to suggest this tonight, but I think we need to clarify. In the middle paragraph, and this is for those of you on the electronic version, it's in 463, the definitions. The definition of certificate of historic appropriateness. And it uses the word in the next to the bottom line, alteration, but I don't know what an alteration encompasses. I mean, does that mean if somebody put a little flower basket sort of permanently attached to a building, that's an alteration? So I think there needs to be some clarification on that. On page 5, and again, we couldn't do this tonight, I don't think, but opt-in boundary, which this is, again, in the definitions, opt-in boundary. Right now, we only have one district of any size. Loughton is self-contained pretty much, but downtown is not. But this is referring just to downtown. But I think that an opt-in boundary definition ought to potentially relate to any future districts that might be created, rather than say, oh, if that ever arises, then we'll have to change it. And it seems to me it'd be pretty easy to phrase this so that it would apply to potential future districts that, have the potential for opt-in. But, I mean, it's not a deal killer. I just think it's something that should be tidied. On page 8, and I haven't attended too many Historic Preservation Board meetings since I was liaison, but I'm looking in section 4.6, new number 8, criteria for designation. Item number 8 has undergone significant historic remodel. I thought that the board was pretty clear about not liking remodels that made something historic or made it look historic. I thought they preferred words like restoration and rehabilitation. And so whether we do that tonight or in the future, I would hope that the board would look at that and see if perhaps that needs to be tidied up. Page 11. This is in section 4.6, newly numbered or proposed number 11, section C, item number 2. This relates to how many members have to be present for certain kinds of action. I find it says at least 5 of 7 members of the board must be present at the hearing in order to establish a quorum. In the event of vacancies on the board, then 2/3 of board members shall constitute a quorum. Well, you could have, what, three vacancies, have 4 people, but should we really allow 4 people to then have a majority vote to decide something? And I would, again, I don't want to move something on this tonight. We don't even have a motion on the floor yet, but I don't want to amend on this. But I would ask the board to look at that too. My own thought would be to eliminate the second sentence and part of the third sentence, starting with the chairman of the board may, blah, 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 through the word or. Because I think when you're dealing with historic preservation, you want to have a substantive part of the fully constituted body making decisions. That's part of the trust factor, I think. Yes, you can have some vacancies, but how many minimum you would need to make decisions related to a public hearing, I think that needs to be looked at. And then page 16, and that's the one Mr. Taylor already looked at, this apparent seeming significant overlap between Part A and number 1 in there.
I'm sorry, Dr. Cole, could you please speak up a little bit?
Oh, what you should...
They can't hear you over there. I know you're ill, but they can't hear you over there, and I can't hear you either.
I am ill. I've got creeping crud.
I know you do. I'm sorry.
So keep your distance. So which part do you want me to repeat?
That very end part that you just said.
The last part?
Yes.
Okay, so on page 16? Okay. So on page 16, I'm referring to what Mr. Taylor already raised, so
Thank you.
sorry about that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Do you have a roster?
While we're waiting on the roster, I would note for the council members who made comments reference back to the board that we do have Chuck Reed in the audience, who's the chairman of HPB, and I'm sure he was taking copious notes on those items that will be discussed with the HPB board on future code amendments recommendations.
And I said this at the first reading, but I'll emphasize it again. When I read these, I read them trying to figure out what I know what to decide based on case coming before us. And in the past few years, it has been a big challenge. And then after the fact, sometimes the board said very nicely, you know, you idiot, it didn't mean that, it meant this. And so I'm trying to make sure that we have that clear definition of things when things come before us.
Okay, public hearing is open, and we have 2 people on the roster. Norm Brown.
I'm Norm Brown, and my address is on the roster there. You probably all know about where I live by now. As a preamble, I was on the board of directors for Friends of Historic Fort Logan while we obtained a grant from the Colorado Historical Society. Some of you have heard this before, but for those of you that haven't, I'll refresh your memory if you've heard it before. And we did a survey for a historic district. The administrative folks, I don't know how far up, that run Fort Logan, Health and Human Services, I believe was the designation at the time, thanked us very kindly and said we are not interested in having a district here. My point of this is these things need to be simple and straightforward to get people on board with this. If they're overly regulatory and there's inadequate compensation, whether tax rebates or grants, people just decline, including the state of Colorado. That being said, I'm going to offer you a little bit of history, which really is only from this year. In April, you guys, and I'm going to need the overhead eventually here, you guys discussed some changes, included some flow charts. There's not an ordinance number on this. It was item 8C on the on April 17th. You'll have to remind me. There we go. There's the flow chart. I'll refer to it, but the details on it aren't particularly important at the moment. At that time, it was ordinance amending Littleton City Code Title 10, Chapters 1, 2, and 9 related to the process for approval of a PDO. In the staff report, they cited from the downtown comprehensive plan that council adopted earlier. We had a rather large discussion at the end of last year and the first part of this year. Land use item number 1B, coordinate zoning and development regulations and processes, and HP-4A, clarify, simplify, and coordinate development review. That was what you guys approved, endorsed. It came out of the Planning Commission when I was on the Planning Commission. I'll ask you to consider that when you look at what you're doing tonight and consider whether you clarify and simplify. I have my suspicions that that's not the net result. The flow chart indicates, and I believe this is the one that ultimately was approved at that time. It's got several steps. We struggled a little bit with the flow chart for a while. There were 3 possibilities. One of the things that was mentioned at that time was under Section 10-9-8, and I know you don't have this. The Historical Preservation Board shall perform a preliminary architectural review and forward all comments to both the Planning Commission and City Council for review at their respective scheduled public hearings, or the process for a certificate of historic appropriateness as described may take the place. In the flow chart, we don't have the architectural review, and as I'll point out later, in what you're considering tonight under the duties of the HP board, this piece is not defined and it's left out. The requirements that an applicant would need to bring in for this preliminary architectural review don't seem to be defined anywhere. So there's the history from April. On tonight's document, I had some concerns under the definitions. Page 3, you've got certificate of demolition, that's new, certificate of economic hardship, and then the certificate of historic appropriateness. A couple of them don't indicate who it is that's giving the approval. when you get down to the center one out of those three, economic hardship, in the definition it defines it's granted by the board. As we'll see later, and I think the director spoke to this, some elements of the COA, the less visible ones, are subject to his approval. Some go to the board. It would be nice in the definitions if you include who has the authority under one of these definitions for the people that come through and say, well, I need a certificate of demolition. Okay, your definition doesn't tell you who it is that you're going to for that, so you don't know. And further, if you've got the certificate of historic appropriateness separated into the visible elements and the non-visible elements, perhaps that is or should be applicable also for these other certificates. If we're focused on the board reviewing things that are really visible from a nearby street, maybe a public park, then also the less visible ones for these other certificates could fall into the category that the director has adequate training and discretion, or staff, Andrea, possibly. So some questions about the definitions there. They seem inconsistent, I'll put it that way. I mentioned the architectural review. In this flow chart, there's also, because we've now come up with these other certificates, there's no indication of how they add to the timeline in this flow chart. I suspect they do. And again, the intent seemingly was to clarify and simplify. So I think I would ask myself, if I were you, is have we done either of those? I think it's better coordinated, but I don't know that it's become simpler. A little more about the economic hardship. If I came in as an applicant and went through the COA review before the Historic Preservation Board, I don't think that I would come back to them. I would not feel comfortable or confident if I came back after they said, well, we'd like to see this done and this done and this done, and I walked out thinking, oh my gosh, I can't afford this, but I own this property. I can't remodel it because of what they asked. Going back to exactly the same board and saying, look, here's my finances, I'm having trouble putting this together, because that's the board that just immediately, without any other hearings involved, any other recourse, has told you that here's what we'd really like to see you do. So I would suggest that that consideration about the economic hardship go to the Board of Adjustment, perhaps, or to a different entity, perhaps the council, so that you don't have this prospect of going back to the very same group that just turns you down. And that that's enough, and that's all for tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Norm. Also listed, Norm and Joan Rounds. Did either of you want to please come on down and state your name and address?
I'm Joan, not Norm. I own the little house, and so I have been remiss in paying attention to as many details as I probably should have with regard to some of this documentation. So I need some clarification, specifically on page 10, section B, designation without owner's consent. And as I read through that, my interpretation tells me that if the property that I own meets this criteria, from B1A through 1 and 2, that the board then could decide to make me a historic make our building a historic landmark without my consent. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Basically.
Well, I'm very much opposed to that. So I won't go into all the reasons. We've owned that property since 1980 and taken better care of it than it was taken care of by the family we bought it from. And I'm opposed to anybody forcing me to be a historic landmark. I think that needs to be an owner's choice. So we've been around this block many, many times. And I thought the decision was made, and now to see it popping up again, I thought it was going to be voluntary, and now it appears to me the wording has made. It appears to me that my property would fit into all of this. Maybe that was done because the city is so interested in that property, but I resent that, and I'm opposed to designation without my consent.
Mayor, I would just mention for the council and for you as well, this is not new code language this evening. This is existing code language that's been in there for a substantial period of time.
What is that substantial period?
Since the original code, this is not a change this evening, other than the word landmark.
No, I understand because it's not in that, but my understanding was, I've owned it since 1980, and it seems like and I could be wrong, but it seems like we went around this block and we were not going to have mandatory, but maybe it just continued to be a matter of discussion. So all I'm saying is that's the building I own, and I'm opposed to it.
Yep, thank you.
And I think, and I may be wrong on this, but this is a landmark designation. It isn't requirement, or it isn't forcing you to opt in. This is also something that the council, when we had a study session with the Historic Preservation Board, we brought it up as a concern, the way that the designation is done and those types of things. And so we have asked the Historic Preservation Board to do some looking at that, and maybe they'll be back in front of council, I think, in October with some recommendations at looking at this. Council's general concern at the time was somewhat in line with what you were saying, is that to just designate properties based on just telling an owner, we're designating, we had some concerns with that. So we will be having a larger discussion with the board regarding that. Thank you. Norm, did you want to speak? Okay. Does anyone else want to come down? Dave?
David Randall. It was a little hard to follow through this because...
Address, please.
Pardon me?
Address, please.
2620 West Main. It was a little hard to follow through this because I was following through what the HP board did, and then it got changed, so some of what I've got here might be a little off. The first thing I objected to was in page 28, 4618. Council review shall be limited to whether the board has abused its discretion. And I think that is far too narrow basis on which to have the council make a decision. It should be broader than that. Some of the decisions that HP board makes are fairly picky in a lot of people's minds, and an appeal from a decision there for other than abuse of discretion should be allowed. So I would ask that you remove that. Then this might be clarified by your updates, but on page...
Dave, I'm sorry. We're paperless, so we have to scroll through these.
Oh,
It takes
okay.
a while. Would you repeat the exact...
It's page 28.
Okay.
Section 4618.
Okay. And which...
And it's sort of at the 4618 toward the bottom, like the fourth sentence up, and council review shall be limited to whether the board has abused its discretion. And I just think you should have a broader standard than that. You may not like it, like what is being appealed, and to be limited to just whether they abused discretion is too narrow a basis for you. In the final sentence of that, final order subject to appeal in accordance with Section 225. I don't know what that section is because it wasn't in the earlier one, but I just wanted to make sure that it limited the appeal to the property owner and did not allow an opening up where the HP board could appeal that on some basis. On page 3, there is an expansion of what is being covered to include site and object.
Page 3?
Page 3.
Okay, give us a second.
Okay. And this is in the definition of certificate of historic appropriateness, where they're adding in the final one that official document approving an application for permit for the erection, demolition, so forth, alteration of any structure, site, or object. That seems to me undefined and overly broad. I don't know what object is, but they might take a very expansive view of what they thought object was. And so I think that that ought to be either defined, limited, or struck out of there would be even better. In page 7, I thought that some of the paragraphs were being struck that seemed to be appropriately left in there. Basically, in the middle of the page, conduct surveys of historic properties, that ought to be left in there. And most importantly, that they maintain records and files of all board actions. That's on page 7. I don't know what was intended, that they don't keep records or that is passed off to someone else or what. I'm not sure. But I think that the board ought to maintain records. I've searched through some of those before to get information on what they were doing. So I think it's important that they keep and maintain records on what their actions are. On page 13, monies in the fund shall be, this is at the bottom paragraph, Main Street Historic District Grant Fund. And my problem was it says monies in this fund shall be established by City Council, and then they're striking from time to time. And it may be just a technical point, but it seems as though it's trying to establish that there shall be this fund. There shall be these monies appropriated or established by council. When it says time to time, it seems like when money's available, we'll do it. But you should, I think I would leave in the current language and not imply that it shall be done. On page 23, I understand that this is to do economic hardship. They're opening this up quite a bit and making a much more public release of information, it seems to me, than they've had before. And I thought that that should be brought back to where they kept personal information, financial records and so forth, private, which is what they've got in the current code. So on page 23 in the economic hardship, for paragraph A, it says in the last one where they've got it stricken, any financial, market, or other personal data submitted shall be kept confidential by the board, protected from disclosure by Colorado Revised Statute, section 2472-204, and so forth. I think it would be important to bring that back to protect private, personal, financial information. There are two other points that will be done. Page 25, in paragraph 5, it talks about the owner applicant, if they don't have certain language in a purchase contract, the preservation code shall be deemed to be conclusive evidence of the fact that the owner applicant is responsible for his or her own economic hardship. And I think that, I don't know when that applies. Does it apply if somebody's had the building for a long time, maybe even before the existence of the HP board? In what circumstances does that? I think that's a pretty heavy standard. Maybe they could consider it, but to have it be conclusive evidence of the fact that the owner's responsible for causing this, which would be a reason to deny their right to demolish. I think that one should be looked at and changed. And one other, which is one that I've not liked for a long time, and this has not necessarily been proposed to be changed, but I would ask you to change it, and that's on page 8. 8. These are the criteria for that it has to meet, a building property has to meet for designation. And number 6.
Hang on just a second.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Don't know how fast you're scrolling. And number 6, one of the standards is represents a built environment of a group of people in an era of history. In that, if you can tell me what does not meet that, it would have to be an individual doing the action by himself. Other than that, time when 2 or more people that it do anything, put up a fence or whatever, would represent a built environment of a group of people in an era of history. We're always in an era of history. So what is excluded from that? And because it's so broad, I would suggest that you delete that. It ends up being listed as one of the reasons for these properties to be designated in darn near every one of these designations for historic landmark status. So I would urge that that one be removed. And if you need a list of any of these, I could hand out one to you. And
Okay, give them to the clerk.
Then I'm done.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Does anyone else want to come down? Chuck?
Good evening. My name is Chuck Reed. I'm chairman of the Historic Preservation Board, and I live at 628 West Easter Place in Littleton. Also here this evening is Historic Board member Dan Murphy, and I will be commenting on the content of the proposed code as well as the process that was followed to get here. I do believe that the process is equally as important as the content. I'm not going to ask that you flip back and forth from page to page either. So first a word about the existing code and about historic preservation in Littleton. Downtown Littleton and the historic Main Street District is really cool. It is within the community a very thriving economic engine, and actually financially within the last 6 or 7 years it's performed and outperformed the rest of the business environment in the city, and done so substantially. That's clearly due to a lot of incredible entrepreneurs who have chose to open their businesses on Main Street, and really great businesses. I also believe that that's due in some small part to the decision that was made by the City Council in Littleton to create a historic Main Street district, and to support that district, and to really build a sense of place that celebrates our heritage and who we are, and honors what we are evolving into. I think that the Historic Preservation Code is also really cool because it allows a group of neighbors, such as Louthan Street, who live in old homes and historic homes, to have those homes designated. And it really distinguishes characteristics in neighborhoods in Littleton that separate us from a lot of the other jurisdictions that we compete with in terms of housing, in terms of people who choose to live in a community. And to have that designation, there's a group of folks that seek that out. And so I would like to applaud the council for having that vision and for making this tool, the historic preservation tool, available within the community. The proposed code that is before you tonight is the product of a lot of work and a lot of commitment from a lot of people. It includes the very initial request that was made and came from downtown business owners and historic preservationists who wanted to preserve and enhance that sense of place that is historic downtown Littleton. The proposed code continues Littleton's commitment to property owners. I want to say that again. The proposed code continues Littleton's commitment to property owners, and that property rights are valued, and that property owners are respected through the unique and continued opt-in district. That's a very clear commitment that's been made by Littleton, and I'm pleased that that's going to continue. The proposed code reflects several years of experience implementing the city's first historic preservation code. I'm pleased that we've learned over the implementation from the last several years and are bringing an item back in front of the council for additional consideration. The code also carries the outcomes of a very dynamic and extensive community outreach program called True Grit that happened a couple of years ago, and that focused on historic preservation in Littleton. And that was a very active and involved community outreach program that had great impact and led to a lot of the changes that you're seeing tonight. The proposed code and the draft that's in front of you tonight was also seen by the Historic Preservation Board for the first time yesterday after 3 p.m. And I was pleased that the draft that is before you includes the entire code and not just the sections that were recommended to be changed. That form of presentation had been requested by the Historic Preservation Board, as it really does help provide context for the changes and really does highlight the interrelationships that exist between the various sections of the code, and as was talked about by other people earlier this evening. Again, yesterday was the first time that the Historic Preservation Board had seen these proposed changes in this form and format. And in fact, as was mentioned, this form includes changes that have not been seen or discussed by the Historic Preservation Board. And as such, I do not have a recommendation from the Historic Preservation Board on this proposed code change. On July 16th, so just a little less than a month ago, the Historic Preservation Board did unanimously approve the proposed changes as they existed at that time. And at that time, the code changes really focused on, I think, the following highlights. There were improved definitions. There was improved process for identifying contributing and non-contributing structures. There was the elimination of the list of merit. And there was a speedier process for inclusion into the district if it was requested by the property owner. Earlier this evening, the changes that were made by council to the code that the board had seen was talked about quickly. My understanding is that those issues are not substantive, and again, I'll reiterate, the Historic Preservation Board does not have an opinion, does not have a recommendation on any of those. I want to digress a minute from some of the content and talk a little bit about the process. The council and the staff have been working hard on a lot of issues, and one of which involves communication protocols for items that are being considered for adoption, like this proposed code change. And it has been stressed, and in fact, I have signed a document that says that I won't discuss this proposed code in a one-on-one situation, but instead to have a conversation with everybody, which I think makes a lot of sense. Move that into the public forum. It's stressed in this new protocol that the information about pending matters be shared so that all decision makers have the same level of information. I am concerned that the Historic Preservation Board received the draft code yesterday, and that we haven't met to discuss the draft that's in front of you tonight. As chairman, perhaps it is my fault that I did not call a special meeting last night so that we could go over these proposed changes. And trust me when I say that I'm learning, and will learn from the situation. I also can imagine that in the really broad spectrum of issues that the council and the staff deals with, the Historic Preservation Code maybe doesn't rate as among the most important or most critical items that are facing you as a council. This is an important issue because when you talk to people about Littleton, the downtown is a draw and a magnet for the entire metropolitan area. This is an issue that has great importance to business owners on downtown Main Street, whether they have chosen to opt into the district or not. And I really believe that it's important for us to get the process right in terms of the content decisions that you all are being asked to approve. I am happy to answer any questions that I can regarding the historic preservation process and take any direction from council on some of the next steps. I would like to reiterate to the rounds that there have been no changes recommended in terms of the non-consensual designation. And the non-consensual designation continuation, it is a factor that the Historic Preservation Board does believe is important for just one or two real signature properties in the community that truly do have very important historic significance. And thank you for being a great owner of one of those, because that's really fantastic. Thank you for your time. I know that you guys take these issues very seriously. You dissect them. You read them very carefully. I'm impressed with how quick you flash through your pages, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chuck. A couple comments regarding a couple of items Chuck mentioned. The process really was followed. The Historic Preservation Board spent time discussing these. They came with their recommendations. We've had a first reading and made some changes on that. Those changes are not required to go back to the Historic Preservation Board. We received their recommendation and have made action upon that. So this evening's is us looking at the changes that we had asked, the edits, and reviewing those, and then, of course, having our second hearing. We did have a first hearing a couple of weeks ago on the subject, so I hope that kind of clears that up. And you had also made an indication about the importance to council on this, and I think at the end you then stated that you felt as though we had shown some importance to it. And I will say that the Historic Preservation Board and the code and the work that they do is of the utmost importance to us. And we have spent a lot of time on this, and it is council that asked if we could please have all 260 pages. So the scrolling is just breakneck speed on this thing right now with that many pages. So thank you, Chuck, for your comments. Anybody? Oh, anybody else? Marty? Oh, okay. Marty, if you want to come on down and hold up 1 second. Bruce has a question for Chuck.
No, that's fine. Chuck, I was just going to ask, you indicated that you didn't have a recommendation on the stuff that had been changed subsequently from HPB, but are there any, you personally having reviewed the document as submitted tonight when you received it, is there anything that you saw that wasn't previously approved by HPB that raised red flags in your mind?
I think the only thing that I'd probably want to make sure that I understand more clearly was that it sounds like there is a change in terms of the district boundaries for the Main Street Historic District, and I don't know if I understood that correctly, that the word generally, which the Historic Preservation Board had requested included, was excluded. Did I get that right?
So HPP did recommend that there was a more general term. I think if we make any change to that, that would go back to HPB.
What does that mean?
In other words, I don't think that that change would be made tonight by council. I think it would stand as HPB's
the way it's written in the document we're looking at,
We would take it as HPB's recommendation, the way it's written now, but Councilmember Taylor asked that staff look at that and possibly change it, and if we did that, it would be my recommendation that that run through HPB before any changes made.
is that what you're referring to, Chuck?
Yes, and I like that interpretation. I like that interpretation. So.
Okay, thank you.
Beyond that, no, for me, speaking just for me, I was comfortable with the changes.
Okay.
Thank you. Marty?
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. I'm Martin Bolt from District 2. I'd like to remind you that you are not the authors of this document, and you're hearing a lot of complaints tonight. But you are the custodians, but at least you're off the hook that you didn't write it.
Small solace.
Well, yeah, but at least you can smile a little bit about that. There's two things that sort of grind my axe here. One of them I wanted to address is something that keeps cropping up, and it's this allowance for abeyance of parking requirements for parking spaces, which encourages people to opt into this district, which almost sounds like a form of bribery or blackmail, whichever the circumstance might be. And looking on page 14, I was looking for where this was identified because I was looking for more specifics on it. And I didn't have a chance to follow any further because on page 14 it talks about owners of properties within the Main Street Historic District are entitled to other exemptions for sales and use tax under sections 3932 and 3943 and parking requirements under section 10-4-9. So I started looking for 3943 and 1049 and I couldn't find any specific reference to it. And I hear them talk about, well, if you join the area of the district, you can get a 50% reduction in your parking requirements. And is that true? Or is it 100% they can give them, or no percent, or 10, or what is the requirement in this case, or the allowance that is given to the Historic Preservation Board?
I think it's 50% reduction in whatever the requirement is according to the planning.
Is that the maximum, or that's just a flat 50%?
I think that's the incentive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where does it say it? This is
Glenn?
In the parking code, if you're in the Main Street District and you're adding square footage, then you get a 50% break on the required parking for that addition of the square footage.
And it is, I think, in 10-4-9-4 paren Z.
Page.
I looked it up.
What page?
10-4-9-4 paren Z in the code, in the parking, in the general code.
Of the general code?
You know, in Title 10, in all the city code.
Okay. But there's no specific reference to where that is for somebody who wants to pursue it. And typically, in a well-written document, you have references that take you where you need to get to find what all the requirements are.
It says under 10-4-9, so you get that far, and then you have to read down to get to -4 paren Z.
This whole business of this allowance and the way it's been handled, it's looked at up and down the street as a reason to get into this thing in order to get this reduction, even though they have no interest in the district or maybe any real requirements for it, but they are in it, which I think in the spirit of Littleton, I guess that bothers me. And the business of non-consensual bothers me as a Littleton resident as well. It just doesn't flow right that we're doing things like that. I think the document is somewhat remiss in proper referencing and identifying requirements and maybe redundant in a number of cases. And another thing that struck me was this 40-year requirement. And my first thought was 40 years from when? You know, that means actually I qualify for it at my house already. And of course, now the house is getting near 50 years old. That's true. But I don't see it as something that I think fits into this category. My background, while I worked in engineering at a local aerospace company, is I had supervisory responsibility for specifications. And we have to be exact in what we said, how we said it, what the requirements were, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I would say that I would hope this document would be rewritten. And I think you probably could reduce it to half or a third of what it now says. It might be easier to read, and you might get better definition of some things that are said. And I hadn't really planned to discuss this, but I'm just going to throw it to you. On the same page that I'm looking at, it talks about prohibited acts for historic landmarks is deterioration of exterior walls and other vertical supports. All walls are not vertical supports. There's such a thing as a brick surface. Deterioration of roofs are horizontal members. Roofs are not necessarily horizontal. In fact, you almost never see a horizontal roof. The deterioration of external chimneys, they're all external. Are they not? Okay. Et cetera, et cetera. So it goes on and on like that, and I think it almost seems that whoever originally wrote this thing, it's too bad we can't talk to them, were trying to create a 5,000-word essay when 2,000 words would have worked. Anyway, good luck with all of this, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Marty. Anybody else? Okay. Council, I need a motion.
So I have a question about procedure. If someone wanted to make a motion to ask for HPB input on this, as in postpone and ask for their input, will we do that before or after a main motion?
You could
First,
make it as, I'm
Mayor,
sorry.
Yeah, can you close the public hearing first and then?
Close public hearing.
There you go. I think you can do it, the main motion, and then if you want to amend it.
Peggy, are you saying amend it or table it?
No, I'm considering moving to postpone it to give HPB a chance to comment on issues that were raised tonight and on what was raised in the first reading that they didn't have a chance to talk about. And I guess I could make a statement here since I'm already talking. I like Chuck very much. He, I think, is a great chairman, but I don't think asking him alone, and he said he was speaking only for himself, whether he thought there were any issues with what was discussed already tonight, the new stuff or the additions, would be any different than asking a single council person who was someplace whether or not something was okay. I think a whole board, a whole council needs to be giving input. And it's not like we have an immediate safety or welfare issue that we couldn't give this a couple more weeks or sometime in September so that we would give them a chance to look at it just to see and to consider some of the issues that we raised and members of the audience raised. So that was...
Okay, does someone want to make a motion?
All right, I'll move to approve the ordinance on second reading, amending portions of Title 4, Chapter 6 of the Historic Preservation Code.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Jim?
The only reason I will vote for this to move forward tonight is if we will get a commitment from the staff that they will come back with proposed changes to this ordinance based upon some of the comments that were made tonight during the public hearing and also from the council dais.
Bruce.
It's pretty clear this isn't a perfect document or ordinance, and the folks who made the public comment addressed some of the issues of conflicting language and complication. And I think it's very difficult. I personally think it's very difficult to read, and it's very difficult for someone who's not familiar with it, who's interested in it, to know what to do in some cases. So I share the sentiment that this is certainly not perfect. I think the comments of the public tonight address some of those, and I think those issues are significant. So my question is similar to Jim's. I would like to think that we can pass something with the intent of moving forward, but with the understanding that we're not etching it in concrete and that we can make further changes. There are a lot of changes that have been suggested to the document we're looking at tonight, and I feel as though if we could get those clarifications included into a fresh-looking document, we would have the opportunity for HPB to go back and perhaps take another stab at a complicated circumstance. So in a way I'm saying what Jim is saying, and for the HPB then to consider some of these concerns of the public who have to use this and implement it. I am concerned personally that a couple issues. I don't think it does really clearly state the balance between private property rights and the benefits of being in a historical designation. I think the non-consensual discussion in there is clearly oriented in a certain direction, but I would like to see also something that addresses private property rights a little more clearly. And I think the role of the director and the role of the board is not as clear as it could be. There are points at which the director makes a decision, points at which the board is required to make the decision, and I think that can be clarified also. I think this whole issue of whether we had a complete document to work with or just worked with the changes, that's a process issue for council, but it's a significant issue for the public to be able to review these things and fully understand them or try to in order to make public comment. And I think we got it the second time. I don't think we got it the first time. And I would hope that maybe if we looked at a revised document in the next few months, we might do it better. And I think it's important to see the whole code and the changes and the recommendations. So I would suggest that we stay with that process. So those are a lot of comments, but I'm in support of moving ahead tonight, but I'm somewhat on the same track as Jim. I really want to see us recognize there's more yet to be done, and we need to move to do it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Bill.
Echoing a bit of what both Jim and Bruce have said, there are a number of things that are in this code revision that have been problematic. I'll put one at the top of the list, which is understanding what's contributing and non-contributing, which also ekes into some of the process as well as roles. This is one of those where we have a step forward and it might be a 10-yard journey. I know that we have also put out on the agenda for consideration by the Historic Preservation Board some elements, one being one that received a number of comments, which is what are the incentives for being in the district, what are the, and making sure that we understand that and have a better clarification and a review of that. So there will be an opportunity. I don't know what the time frame for that is, but we will be taking a look at this is not a closed book on this segment of the code, and we'll echo what Bruce and Jim have said, that whatever we can do to indeed hit at what Norm was saying, which is what we were really trying to do is also clarify and simplify so that folks can understand what's there. We're not getting all of that done this time, but there is some things that are step forwards in this that are not conflicting. And a note here, we haven't exacerbated where the current code is on non-consensual. And that's something that's left for later consideration.
Okay, Jerry.
Yes, thank you. I recognize and appreciate the work that everybody has put into this document, but I do have many concerns with it. For instance, where in this document that we have before us tonight, where does it talk about the property rights of those that do not choose to opt in? What it does talk about is those that are opting in, and then you have the non-consensuals, of course, that are being pulled into it, but still it doesn't talk about those that are not opting in at all. This document does not clearly outline the process and make the process less complex. It just, there's too many things in there where it's a definition. It makes it very unclear to me. It seems we are chipping away at property rights one bit at a time here, and I'm uncomfortable with that. I'm also not comfortable with approving a document tonight that requires more work, that many of us believe it requires more work, but approving it tonight with the understanding that somebody at some time is going to make it a better document. I just find that as an interesting way to do business. That's it.
Okay. Bruce?
Well, I guess, from a context standpoint, I think the orientation here was to basically do some cleanup on the original code, and there's the rub. The original code is sort of a wonderful example of the art of compromise because there were many, many cooks in the kitchen to build this thing in the first place. It was designed to accommodate something that really didn't have a lot of models elsewhere in the country, as in the opt-in district. Littleton has essentially one of maybe only a handful of opt-in downtown districts anywhere in the country. And so what this thing represents, for all the right reasons, in terms of all the parties who wanted, to have an historic district, as well as the parties who, didn't want to be participatory in the historic district, it sort of plays a little bit of twister in terms of, originally played a little bit of twister in terms of trying to accommodate everyone in a lot of different ways. Part of the problem with this thing originally was really the Historic Preservation Board, predominantly the vast majority of their activities since I think their existence has been issuing certificates of appropriateness. But a lot of the rest of the stuff that's in here is for circumstances that theoretically could arise, but that we really haven't seen arise with any degree of frequency. So economic hardship, we have some process to try to attend or deal with that. Certificates of demolition, I can think of one which was the property next to the tavern, which I think was demolished. I'm not sure they even went through a certificate. I mean, really the essence of this says that if you want to opt in, you can opt in to the historic district. In so many words, that's what we're saying with this thing. If you don't want to opt in, your property rights aren't impinged at all. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to come before the board. You can do whatever you feel like doing. The non-consensual thing, I guess, in my opinion, I totally respect what Ms. Round was saying. You don't want to historically designate the property. Completely respect that. I think this particular section, and this has always been that tricky balance between, where is the fulcrum when it comes to the public's interest in a particular structure versus the private property owner's interest, and both stakeholders have some level of claim. I don't know that, I honestly don't think, we may have used that once in the history of this. I honestly don't know that we've ever historically or non-consensually designated anything, but the bar, to me, on that thing was set very, very high because it is such an important item that you would have to be beyond the pale to ever invoke the thing, and I think that's the way it's written. I'm inclined to move it forward. I agree with what Peggy said to a certain extent, that it'd be nice to have the whole HPB give their blessing, yet at the same point in time, I think the sum and substance of what we did on first reading, which they did review, was materially what we're seeing here. And to Jim's point, there's going to be a need for tweaking. And to some of the speakers' comments, yeah, there's a lot of cleanup stuff that could yet be done to make this a more usable, readable document. But as I said, I think part of what we're seeing here and what we're wrestling with is a lot of circumstances and situations that maybe could arise, and something that's come to this point over many, many years and many, many conversations and many people trying to refine it to fit in a way that works for our community. So I would support moving it forward accordingly.
Okay. Anybody else? Peggy?
Yes, I think process is really important, so I cannot support just voting for this tonight when we could just take a month and ask for the whole board to comment. It is no disrespect to the chairman of that board in saying this. I think it's important to give the whole board the opportunity for additional input. There is no rush on this, so I'm thinking a month. I can't support not giving them that opportunity.
Anyone else? My take on this is, and I'll support this evening because I do believe that we have a document that we requested edits to. We have approval from, we had unanimous approval from the Historic Preservation Board. The issues that came up tonight affect this document, but they are not issues that affect what we were asked to approve here. I believe that the issues are big enough that they can move to the October 23rd study session with the Historic Preservation Board. We have asked them to come back with some recommendations on some other issues. I think there were a number of issues brought up this evening. Primary, in my opinion, which in one way encompasses almost every other comment, and that is to simplify this. I have found it to be a very cumbersome document. When you get 260 pages sent to you, that is a historic preservation code that covers 4 or 5 city blocks. It seems to me that it is something that's not, it is important, it shows the importance of it, but it also shows that we may have overlayered it and overcomplicated it, because when it really boils down to is just a few common or a few real facts, and that is you want in, you want out. If you want in, this is what you get. You want out, here's what happens. And I think you have to have the legalese added to it, and that can be appropriate too, but some more study on that is, I'm in favor of definitely moving this, some more conversation. I am not in favor of stopping this in order to get a blessing on our changes from last week from the Historic Preservation Board. We have a role in the community to lead, and I think that we need to make a decision on that this evening. So, Council, if there's no more discussion, are you ready to vote? A yes vote approves this on second reading.
The vote is 5 in favor, with Councilmember Cole and Councilmember Valdez voting no. The motion carries 5-2.
Okay, our next item, I believe, and help me on procedure with this, we should adjourn to our executive session.
You should recess to the executive session.
Recess.
I would suggest that
we'll recess to the exec.
No, we need a motion.
We need to have a motion for.
Right. I'm just talking about procedure right now. We will go into an exec session with the intention of coming back out, and we will conduct additional business when we come out. I need a motion. Bruce?
City Council will conduct an executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute Section 24-6-402 sub 4 sub E pertaining to negotiations relating to the city ditch trail property acquisitions, and CRS Section 24-6-402 sub 4 sub B and 24-6-402 sub 4 sub E for legal advice and negotiations relating to the Chatfield reallocation DEIS.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ready to vote? Excuse me, Jim?
I would suggest that we take the second item on the Chatfield reallocation first, and then recess our executive session, come back in here and take our vote, and then go back and finish our executive session for the second item.
It's my understanding that the item, the City Ditch Trail, is not going to be discussed this evening.
Correct.
And why is it part of the motion?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
It was not.
Sorry, Councilman Stallman.
That decision was,
revised.
yeah, that decision was made after the packet was published. I'm sorry. So you can revise the motion.
All right.
To exclude.
Yeah. Move also that council, the executive session, exclude negotiations relating to city ditch trail property acquisitions accordingly.
Okay. Okay. Ready to vote?
The motion is the vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Okay.
We'll be back.
Who's included? We didn't actually cover that.